The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is an American children's novel written by author L.Frank Baum and illustrated by W.W.Denslow, originally published by the George M. Hill Company in Chicago on May 17, 1900. It has since been reprinted on numerous occasions, most often under the title The Wizard of Oz, which is the title of the popular 1902 Broadway musical as well as the iconic 1939 musical film adaptation. The story chronicles the adventures of a young farm girl named Dorothy in the magical land of Oz, after she and her pet dog Toto are swept away from the Kansas home by a cyclone. The novel is one of the best-known stories in American literature and has been widely translated. The Library of Congress has declared it America's greatest and best-loved homegrown fairy tale. Quote, its groundbreaking success and the success of the Broadway musical adapted from the novel led Baum to write 13 additional Oz books that serve as official sequels to the first story. Baum dedicated the book to my good friend and comrade, my wife Maud Gage Baum. In January 1901, George M. Hill Company completed printing the first edition, a total of 10,000 copies, which quickly sold out. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz sold 3 million copies by the time it entered the public domain in 1956. Publication. The book was published by George M. Hill Company. Its first edition had a printing of 10,000 copies and was sold in advance of the publication date of September 1, 1900. On May 17, 1900, the first copy of the book came off the press. Baum assembled it by hand and presented it to his sister Mary Louise Baum Brewster. The public saw the book for the first time at a book fair at the Palmer House in Chicago, July 5 to 20. The book's copyright was registered on August 1. Full distribution followed in September. By October 1900, the first edition had already sold out and the second edition of 15,000 copies was nearly depleted. In a letter to his brother Harry, Baum wrote that the book's publisher George M. Hill predicted a sale of about 250,000 copies. In spite of this favorable conjecture, Hill did not initially predict that the book would be phenomenally successful. He agreed to publish the book only when the manager of the Chicago Grand Opera House, Fred R. Hamlin, committed to making The Wonderful Wizard of Oz into a musical stage play to publicize the novel. The play The Wizard of Oz debuted on June 16, 1902. It was revised to suit adult preferences and was crafted as a musical extravaganza, with the costumes modeled after Denslow's drawings. Hill's publishing company became bankrupt in 1901, so Baum and Denslow agreed to have the Indianapolis-based Bobbs Merrill Company resume publishing the novel. Baum's son Harry Neal told the Chicago Tribune in 1944 that L.Frank told his children whimsical stories before they became material for his books. Harry called his father the swellest man I knew, a man who was able to give a decent reason as to why blackbirds cooked in a pie could afterwards get out and sing. By 1938, more than 1 million copies of the book had been printed. Less than 2 decades later, in 1956, the sales of his novel had grown to 3 million copies in print. Plot summary. Dorothy is a young girl who lives with her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry and her little dog Toto on a Kansas farm. One day, Dorothy and Toto are caught up in a cyclone that deposits her farmhouse into Munchkin country in the magical land of Oz. The falling house has killed the Wicked Witch of the East, the evil ruler of the Munchkins. The Good Witch of the North arrives with the grateful Munchkins and gives Dorothy the magical silver shoes that once belonged to the witch. The Good Witch tells Dorothy that the only way she can return home is to go to the Emerald City and ask the great and powerful Wizard of Oz to help her. As Dorothy embarks on her journey, the Good Witch of the North kisses her on the forehead, giving her magical protection from harm. On her way down the yellow brick road, Dorothy attends a banquet held by a Munchkin man named B.O.Q. The next day, Dorothy frees the Scarecrow from the pole on which he is hanging, applies oil from a can to the rusted connections of the Tin Woodman, and meets the Cowardly Lion. The Scarecrow wants a brain, the Tin Woodman wants a heart, and the Cowardly Lion wants courage. So Dorothy encourages the three of them to journey with her and Toto to the Emerald City to ask for help from the wizard. After several adventures, the travelers enter the gates of the Emerald City and meet the Guardian of the Gates, who asks them to wear green-tinted spectacles to keep their eyes from being blinded by the city's brilliance. Each one is called to see the wizard. Dorothy sees the wizard as a giant head on a marble throne, the Scarecrow as a lovely lady in silk gauze, the Tin Woodman as a terrible beast, the Cowardly Lion as a ball of fire. The wizard agrees to help them all if they kill the Wicked Witch of the West, who rules over Oz's Winky Country. The Guardian warns them that no one has ever managed to defeat the witch. The Wicked Witch of the West sees the travelers approaching with her one telescopic eye. She sends a pack of wolves to tear them to pieces, but the Tin Woodman kills them with his axe. She sends wild crows to peck their eyes out, but the Scarecrow kills them by breaking the necks. She summons a swarm of black bees to sting them, but they are killed trying to sting the Tin Woodman, while the Scarecrow's straw hides the other three. She sends her Winky soldiers to attack them, but the Cowardly Lion stands firm to repel them. Finally, she uses the power of the Golden Cap to send the Winged Monkeys to capture Dorothy, Toto, and the Cowardly Lion, unstuff the Scarecrow, and end the Tin Woodman. Dorothy is forced to become the Wicked Witch's personal slave, while the witch schemes to steal Dorothy's silver shoes. The Wicked Witch successfully tricks Dorothy out of one of her silver shoes. Angered, Dorothy throws a bucket of water at her and is shocked to see the witch melt away. The Winkies rejoice at being freed of the witch's tyranny and help restuff the Scarecrow and mend the Tin Woodman. They ask the Tin Woodman to become the ruler, which he agrees to do after helping Dorothy return to Kansas. Dorothy finds the Golden Cap and summons the Winged Monkeys to carry her and her companions back to the Emerald City. The King of the Winged Monkeys tells how he and the other monkeys are bound by an enchantment to the cap by the sorcerer Scarlet from the north, and that Dorothy may use the cap to summon the Winged Monkeys 2 more times. When Dorothy and her friends meet the Wizard of Oz again, Toto tips over a screen in a corner of the throne room that reveals the wizard. He sadly explains he is a humbug, an ordinary old man who, by a hot air balloon, came to Oz long ago from Omaha. The wizard provides the Scarecrow with a head full of bran, pins, and needles, the Tin Woodman with a silk heart stuffed with sawdust, and the Cowardly Lion a potion of courage. The faith in the wizard's power gives these items a focus for the desires. The wizard decides to take Dorothy and Toto home and leave the Emerald City. At the send-off, he appoints the Scarecrow to rule in his stead, which he agrees to do after Dorothy returns to Kansas. Toto chases a kitten in the crowd and Dorothy goes after him, but the tethers of the balloon break and the wizard floats away. Dorothy summons the Winged Monkeys to carry her and Toto home, but they explain they cannot cross the desert surrounding Oz. The soldier with the green whiskers informs Dorothy that Glinda, the Good Witch of the South, may be able to help her return home. So the friends begin the journey to see Glinda, who lives in Oz's Quadling Country. On the way, the Cowardly Lion kills a giant spider who is terrorizing the animals in a forest. The animals ask the Cowardly Lion to become the king, which he agrees to do after helping Dorothy return to Kansas. Dorothy summons the winged monkeys a third time to fly them over a mountain to Glinda's palace. Glinda greets the travelers and reveals that the silver shoes Dorothy wears can take her anywhere she wishes to go. Dorothy embraces her friends, all of whom will be returned to the new kingdoms through Glinda's 3 uses of the Golden Cap: the Scarecrow to the Emerald City, the Tin Woodman to the Winky Country, and the Lion to the forest, after which the cap shall be given to the king of the winged monkeys, freeing them. Dorothy takes Toto in her arms, knocks her heels together 3 times, and wishes to return home. Instantly, she begins whirling through the air and rolling through the grass of the Kansas prairie, up to her Kansas farmhouse. Dorothy runs to her Aunt Em, saying, "I'm so glad to be at home again." Illustration and design. The book was illustrated by Baum's friend and collaborator W.W.Denslow, who also co-held the copyright. The design was lavish for the time, with illustrations on many pages, backgrounds in different colors, and several color plate illustrations. In September 1900, the Grand Rapids Herald wrote that Denslow's illustrations are quite as much of the story as in the writing. The editorial opined that had it not been for Denslow's pictures, the readers would be unable to picture precisely the figures of Dorothy, Toto, and the other characters. The distinctive look led to imitators at the time, most notably Eva Catherine Gibson's Zauberlinda, the Wise Witch, which mimicked both the typography and the illustration design of Oz. The typeface was the newly designed monotype old style. Denslow's illustrations were so well known that merchants of many products obtained permission to use them to promote the wares. The forms of the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, the Cowardly Lion, the Wizard, and Dorothy were made into rubber and metal sculptures. Costume jewelry, mechanical toys, and soap were also designed using the figures. A new edition of the book appeared in 1944, with illustrations by Evelyn Kopelman. Although it was claimed that the new illustrations were based on Denslow's originals, they more closely resembled the characters as seen in the famous 1939 film version of Baum's book. Cultural impact. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz has become an established part of multiple cultures, spreading from its early young American readership to becoming known throughout the world. It has been translated or adapted into well over 50 languages, at times being modified in local variations. For instance, in some abridged Indian editions, the Tin Woodman was replaced with a snake. In Russia, a translation by Alexander Milentievich Volkov produced 5 books, the Wizard of the Emerald City series, which became progressively distanced from the Baum version, as Ellie and her dog Totoshka travel throughout the Magic Land. The 1939 film adaptation has become a classic of popular culture, shown annually on American television from 1959 to 1991 and then several times a year every year beginning in 1999. More recently, the story has become an American stage production with an all-black cast, set in the context of modern African-American culture. Critical response. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz received positive critical reviews upon release. In a September 1900 review, the New York Times praised the novel, writing that it would appeal to child readers and to younger children who could not read yet. The review also praised the illustrations for being a pleasant complement to the text. During the first 50 years after The Wonderful Wizard of Oz's publication in 1900, it received little critical analysis from scholars of children's literature. According to Ruth Berman of Science Fiction Studies, the lists of suggested reading published for juvenile readers never contained Baum's work. The lack of interest stemmed from the scholars' misgivings about fantasy, as well as to the belief that lengthy series had little literary merit. It has frequently come under fire over the years. In 1957, the director of Detroit's libraries banned The Wonderful Wizard of Oz for having no value for children of his day, for supporting negativism, and for bringing children's minds to a cowardly level. Professor Russell B. Nye of Michigan State University countered that, if the message of the Oz books, love, kindness, and unselfishness make the world a better place, seems of no value today, then maybe the time is ripe for reassessing good many other things besides the Detroit Library's approved list of children's books. In 1986, 7 fundamentalist Christian families in Tennessee opposed the novel's inclusion in the public school syllabus and filed a lawsuit. They based their opposition to the novel on its depicting benevolent witches and promoting the belief that integral human attributes were individually developed rather than God-given. One parent said, "I do not want my children seduced into godless supernaturalism." Other reasons included the novel's teaching that females are equal to males and that animals are personified and can speak. The judge ruled that when the novel was being discussed in class, the parents were allowed to have their children leave the classroom. Feminist author Marjorie Arahan has described the book as a banal and mechanistic story which is written in flat, impoverished prose. Leonard Everett Fisher of the Hornbook magazine wrote in 2000 that Oz has a timeless message from a less complex era, and it continues to resonate. The challenge of valuing oneself during impending adversity has not, Fish noted, lessened during the prior 100 years. In a 2002 review, Bill Delaney of Salem Press praised Baum for giving children the opportunity to discover magic in the mundane things in their everyday lives. He further commended Baum for teaching millions of children to love reading during the crucial formative years. The Library of Congress has declared The Wonderful Wizard of Oz to be America's greatest and best-loved homegrown fairy tale, also naming it the first American fantasy for children and one of the most read children's books. Additions. After George M. Hill's bankruptcy in 1902, copyright in the book passed to the Bobs Merrill Company. The editions they published lacked most of the in-text color and color plates of the original. It was not until the book entered the public domain in 1956 that new editions, either with the original color plates or new illustrations, proliferated. Notable among them are the 1986 Pennyroyal edition illustrated by Barry Moser, which was reprinted by the University of California Press, and the 2000 annotated Wizard of Oz edited by Michael Patrick Hearn, which was published by W.W. Norton and included all the original color illustrations, as well as supplemental artwork by Denslow. Other centennial editions included University Press of Kansas's Kansas Centennial Edition, illustrated by Michael McCurdy with black and white illustrations, and Robert Sabuda's pop-up book. Sequels. Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz without any thought of a sequel. After reading the novel, thousands of children wrote letters to him, requesting that he craft another story about Oz. In 1904, he wrote and published the first sequel, The Marvelous Land of Oz, explaining that he grudgingly wrote the sequel to address the popular demand. Baum also wrote sequels in 1907, 1908, and 1909. In his 1911 The Emerald City of Oz, he wrote that he could not continue writing sequels because Ozland had lost contact with the rest of the world. The children refused to accept this story, so Baum, in 1913 and every year thereafter until his death in May 1919, wrote an Oz book, ultimately writing 13 sequels. The Chicago Tribune's Russell McFall wrote that Baum explained the purpose purpose of his novels in a note he penned to his sister, Mary Louise Brewster, in a copy of Mother Goose in Prose, his first book. He wrote, "To please a child is a sweet and a lovely thing that warms one's heart and brings its own reward." Quote. After Baum's death in 1919, Baum's publishers delegated the creation of more sequels to Ruth Plumly Thompson, who wrote 21. An original Oz book was published every Christmas, between 1913 and 1942. By 1956, 5 million copies of the Oz books had been published in the English language, while hundreds of thousands had been published in 8 foreign languages. Adaptations. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz has been adapted to other media numerous times, most famously in The Wizard of Oz, a 1939 film starring Judy Garland, Ray Bolger, Jack Haley, and Burt Lahr. Until this version, the book had inspired a number of now less well-known stage and screen adaptations, including a profitable 1902 Broadway musical and 3 silent films. The 1939 film was considered innovative because of its songs, special effects, and revolutionary use of the new Technicolor. The story has been translated into other languages and adapted into comics several times. Following the lapse of the original copyright, the characters have been adapted and reused in spin-offs, unofficial sequels, and reinterpretations, some of which have been controversial in the treatment of Baum's characters.